Beloved, understand this truth. Days do not control men. Men who understand spiritual principles control days. A week is not just a sequence of time. It is a spiritual territory, and every territory must be dedicated, governed, and authorized. This Monday is not ordinary. Before meetings begin, before journeys start, before decisions are taken, we stand at the gate of the week to commit it deliberately into the hands of God. What you don't pray into, you permit chaos to negotiate. But what you submit to God comes under divine supervision. Now, lift your heart, align your spirit, and enter this prayer. God is the owner of time. Every week submits to his authority. This truth is not poetic language. It is a governing spiritual reality. Time is not an independent force moving randomly through existence. Time is a creation, and everything created answers to the Creator. Before days were named, before weeks were counted, before calendars were designed by men, time already had a master. Scripture reveals that God sits above time, yet he works within it, directing seasons, moments, and outcomes according to his will. This means that Monday is not just the beginning of human activity. It is a spiritual gate. When a new week opens, it does not open empty. It opens awaiting instruction. Whoever gives the first command at the gate of time determines the tone, the flow, and the result of that season. Many people live as victims of time because they relate to it only naturally. They wake up, rush through hours, react to pressures, and hope that things somehow work out. But spiritual understanding changes posture. When a man understands that God owns time, he stops begging the week for mercy and starts aligning the week with divine authority. A week that is not submitted will behave like a wild system, unpredictable, exhausting, and full of resistance. But a week that is committed to God becomes orderly, purposeful, and responsive. Time recognizes its owner, and when his name is invoked, chaos retreats. God's ownership of time means that no day is permitted to act outside divine jurisdiction unless allowed by ignorance or neglect. When God is acknowledged at the start of a week, that acknowledgement becomes a legal declaration in the spirit realm. It announces that this territory is under divine government. Just as land without leadership becomes vulnerable to invasion, time without dedication becomes vulnerable to spiritual interference. That is why many weeks begin with excitement and end in confusion. Not because God failed, but because God was never invited to lead. Time responds to authority, and authority must be consciously established. When a believer commits a week into God's hands, they are not performing a ritual. They are enforcing a spiritual order. They are declaring that accidents are not permitted, that losses are not authorized, that delays must justify their existence or leave. This understanding brings rest to the soul. You stop fighting time and start flowing with grace. You realize that you are not racing against days. Days are cooperating with divine purpose on your behalf. This is why scripture speaks of redeeming the time, not by anxiety, but by wisdom. Wisdom aligns with ownership. God's ownership of time also means that he has the power to compress, expand, pause, and accelerate moments according to destiny. One encounter can correct years of error. One inspired decision can recover months of delay. When a week is placed in God's hands, efficiency replaces struggle. You may do fewer things, yet achieve greater results. This is the mystery of divine involvement in time. Effort reduces while impact increases. God does not just fill time, he qualifies it. He removes distractions that waste energy and highlights assignments that carry eternal weight. Furthermore, when God governs a week, the emotional burden attached to time lifts. Anxiety often comes from feeling chased by deadlines, expectations, and uncertainties. But when time submits to God, peace becomes dominant. You understand that nothing ordained for you can miss you, and nothing not assigned to you deserves your stress. This confidence is not arrogance. It is trust in divine oversight. The week stops feeling heavy because you are no longer carrying it alone. You have handed it to the one who cannot be overwhelmed. Another dimension of God's ownership of time is preservation. When a week is submitted, it is protected from unseen disruptions. There are spiritual transactions that occur in time, meetings, conversations, delays, opportunities that shape outcomes beyond what the eyes can see. God's hand over time ensures that what should not meet you is blocked and what must meet you is aligned. This is why some doors open by coincidence and some dangers are avoided by chance. In reality, it is divine control over time responding to submission. To say God owns time is also to say that time can testify. Weeks carry records. They witness decisions, responses, and alignments. A week committed to God becomes a witness of obedience. And such weeks often end with gratitude instead of regret. When Friday arrives, you are not asking what went wrong, but declaring, look what the Lord has done. This is the difference between surviving a week and stewarding a week. Ownership determines outcome. Understanding that God is the owner of time shifts responsibility from panic to partnership. You still act, you still plan, you still work, but you do so under divine leadership. You stop forcing outcomes and start following instruction. Each morning becomes a continuation of divine conversation, not a battle for control. And as the week unfolds, it carries the signature of God's authority, clarity in decisions, strength in challenges, favor in interactions, and peace at the end. A week submitted to God does not merely pass, it fulfills purpose. What is committed to God is preserved from error and loss. This is a spiritual principle that governs outcomes across every dimension of life. Preservation is not accidental. It is the natural result of alignment. When something is handed over to God, it leaves the realm of human limitation and enters the jurisdiction of divine oversight. Many losses in life do not occur because people are careless, but because they attempt to carry responsibilities that were never designed to be managed by human strength alone. The moment a matter is truly committed to God, it becomes shielded from the vulnerabilities that produce costly mistakes. Error is not always the result of ignorance. Often it is the product of pressure. Under stress, people make decisions too quickly, speak without wisdom, and act without discernment. Loss follows not because they are evil or foolish, but because they are overwhelmed. Commitment to God removes the burden of self-dependence. It introduces divine guidance into moments where clarity would otherwise be compromised. When God is involved, timing becomes accurate, judgment becomes sound, and reactions become measured. You begin to move with restraint and insight rather than haste and fear. To commit something to God is not to abandon responsibility, it is to transfer authority. You still act, but you act under instruction. You still plan, but your plans are flexible to divine correction. This is where preservation begins. God has the ability to interrupt decisions before they become disasters. He can redirect steps before they lead to regret. Many people look back on seasons of their lives and say, if only I had known. What they were really missing was not information, but divine involvement. Knowledge alone cannot preserve you. Alignment can. Loss often enters when people assume control over matters that require grace. There are conversations that should not be had at certain times, partnerships that should not be entered despite appearing profitable, and opportunities that must be delayed until maturity catches up with capacity. When these decisions are committed to God, He filters them. He removes emotional bias and exposes hidden consequences. Preserver. Tion is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a quiet hesitation, an inner discomfort, or a delay that frustrates the flesh but saves the destiny. Another dimension of preservation is protection from unseen variables. Not every threat announces itself. Some losses come through what appears harmless, familiar, or even beneficial at first. God sees beyond the surface. He understands the end from the beginning. When something is committed to him, his foresight becomes your defense. He guards not only against what you fear, but against what you cannot imagine. This is why people under divine guidance often escape disasters they never knew were coming. It is not luck, it is preservation. Committing a matter to God also preserves emotional and mental energy. Many people lose peace before they lose resources. Worry drains strength, anxiety clouds judgment, and fear shortens patience. These internal losses often precede external ones. When God takes custody of a situation, the soul rests. You are no longer trying to control every outcome. This rest sharpens perception. A calm mind hears better, sees clearer, and responds wiser. In this way, peace becomes a form of preservation. You are saved from self-sabotage. There is also preservation from repetition. One of the greatest losses in life is repeating the same mistake in different seasons. When God is not involved, patterns continue unchecked. But when matters are committed to him, he breaks cycles. He introduces learning, growth, and correction. You begin to notice that you no longer fall into the same traps, react the same way, or attract the same problems. This is preservation at the level of character. God does not only save you from events, he saves you from becoming the kind of person who attracts loss. Preservation does not mean absence of challenge. It means absence of wasted pain. You may still face resistance, but it will refine rather than destroy. You may still encounter difficulty, but it will produce wisdom instead of regret. Loss is not always about what is taken. Sometimes it is about what is lost inside. Confidence, joy, direction. When God is involved, even difficult seasons are supervised. Nothing is allowed to strip you of what is essential to your calling. To commit something to God is to acknowledge that he cares more about the outcome than you do. This truth releases trust. You stop guarding things with fear and start releasing them with faith. And in that release, preservation is activated. God does not mismanage what is placed in his hands. He does not forget, neglect, or mishandle destinies. What is committed to him is watched, guided, corrected, and kept. In the end, you realize that the safest place for any plan, decision, relationship, or season is not in your control, but in God's custody. The weak responds to spiritual alignment, not chance. This truth confronts the common assumption that days unfold randomly and outcomes are the result of luck, coincidence, or fate. In reality, time is highly sensitive to spiritual order. What appears as chance in the natural realm is often the result of unseen alignments in the spiritual realm. A week does not wake up with a personality of its own. It takes instruction from the realm of authority that governs it. When alignment is absent, confusion fills the vacuum. When alignment is present, order manifests effortless. Lie. Spiritual alignment begins with understanding position. When a person recognizes God as the ultimate authority and consciously aligns their heart, thoughts, and actions with that authority, time adjusts accordingly. The weak begins to cooperate rather than resist. Tasks that once felt heavy become manageable. Opportunities appear at the right moments. Delays lose their power to frustrate. This is not because life becomes easy, but because life becomes ordered. Alignment does not remove challenges. It places them in proportion, so they no longer overwhelm purpose. Chance thrives where alignment is ignored. When people start a week without spiritual awareness, they unknowingly submit their days to competing influences. Emotions, external pressure, fear, and distraction. These influences fight for control, producing inconsistency and fatigue. One day feels productive, the next feels wasted. One moment brings hope, the next brings discouragement. This instability is often interpreted as just how life is. But in truth, it is a symptom of misalignment. Time reflects the condition of leadership over it. When alignment is established, the week begins with clarity. Priorities arrange themselves. You become more discerning about where to invest energy and where to withdraw. Alignment sharpens sensitivity. You start to sense when a conversation is necessary and when silence is wiser, when to move quickly and when to wait. These inner signals are not accidental. They are the language of alignment. A spiritually aligned person is not reacting to the weak, they are stewarding it. Another evidence that the weak responds to alignment is the consistency of outcomes. In aligned weeks, results may not always be dramatic, but they are steady. Progress replaces chaos. You notice fewer emotional highs and lows, fewer unnecessary crises, and fewer regrets at the end of the day. Alignment creates rhythm. Just as the body functions best when systems are aligned, life flows best when the spirit is aligned. Disorder consumes energy, alignment conserves it. Spiritual alignment also governs encounters. Who you meet, what you hear, and what information reaches you within a week are rarely random. Aligned weeks attract relevant connections and timely insights. A single sentence spoken at the right moment can redirect an entire season. A missed meeting may protect you from an unfavorable outcome. When alignment is active, even interruptions carry meaning. Nothing feels wasted because everything fits within a larger design. Chance offers no explanation and no consistency. Alignment offers direction. When people live by chance, they explain outcomes after they happen. When they live by alignment, they anticipate outcomes before they manifest. This is why spiritually aligned individuals often appear calm in uncertain times. They are not naive, they are anchored. Their confidence is not in their ability to predict events, but in their position under divine authority. They know that whatever the week brings must pass through alignment before it reaches them. Misalignment, on the other hand, makes small issues feel overwhelming. Minor delays feel like disasters. Simple decisions feel confusing. This is because when alignment is broken, time loses coherence. Days feel fragmented. Effort increases while results decrease. Many people try to fix this by working harder or planning more, but effort cannot replace alignment. Without alignment, productivity becomes exhausting and progress becomes fragile. Alignment is maintained through intentional dedication. It requires conscious surrender of ego, impatience, and self-sufficiency. It means beginning the week by acknowledging dependence on God, not as a religious habit, but as a strategic posture. This posture recalibrates the inner world. Thoughts settle, desires become clearer, distractions lose attraction. From this internal order, external order emerges. The weak responds because leadership has been established. To say the weak responds to spiritual alignment is to say that outcomes are not accidental. Your days are not at the mercy of randomness. They are waiting for instruction. When alignment is present, time becomes an ally instead of an enemy. You stop surviving the week and start directing it. And as each day unfolds, you realize that what others call luck is simply the visible result of invisible order, divine. Order replaces confusion when God takes the lead. Confusion is not merely a mental state. It is a symptom of leadership absence. Wherever there is no clear authority, disorder naturally emerges. This principle applies not only to systems and organizations, but also to time, decisions, and personal seasons. When God is not leading, many other voices attempt to fill the vacuum. Emotions, fear, pressure, past experiences, and external opinions. The result is fragmentation. Thoughts pull in different directions. Priorities compete, and progress becomes inconsistent. But the moment God is acknowledged as the leader, confusion begins to dissolve. Divine order does not arrive through human effort. It flows from alignment with divine authority. Order is not something you manufacture. It is something you receive. When God takes the lead, he brings clarity to what truly matters. Decisions that once felt overwhelming become simpler because unnecessary options are removed. Confusion thrives on excess. Too many voices, too many choices, too many motivations. God's leadership filters these voices, leaving behind what is essential. This filtering process is one of the greatest expressions of mercy because it protects you from wasting energy on distractions disguised as opportunities. When God leads, order first appears internally. The mind becomes quieter. The heart becomes steadier. Emotional turbulence reduces. This internal order is crucial because confusion inside eventually manifests as disorder outside. People often try to fix their external chaos without addressing internal confusion. They rearrange schedules, change environments, or seek advice, yet remain unsettled. Divine lead. Our ship works from the inside out. Once the inner world is aligned, the outer world follows naturally. Actions become deliberate instead of reactive. Another way divine order replaces confusion is through timing. Confusion often comes from acting at the wrong time, even when the action itself is correct. God's leadership introduces discernment of seasons. You begin to recognize when to speak and when to remain silent, when to move forward and when to wait. This sensitivity to timing reduces regret. Many mistakes are not the result of bad intentions, but of premature or delayed actions. When God leads, timing is restored, and with it comes peace. Divine order also brings structure to effort. Without God's leadership, people often work hard but see little fruit. Energy is scattered across many tasks without focus. When God leads, effort becomes concentrated. You do fewer things, but each thing carries greater impact. This is order in productivity. You stop being busy and start being effective. Confusion makes you feel productive while accomplishing little. Order makes you feel calm while accomplishing much. In relationships, divine order clarifies boundaries. Confusion blurs lines, what to give, what to withhold, when to engage, and when to step back. Under God's leadership, relationships become healthier because expectations are adjusted. You stop overextending yourself where grace is absent and stop withdrawing where responsibility exists. This balance preserves emotional health and prevents unnecessary conflict. Order does not eliminate tension, but it ensures that tension serves growth rather than destruction. When God leads, order also enters communication. Words become measured. Responses become thoughtful. You are less driven by impulse and more guided by wisdom. Confusion often expresses itself through excessive talking or complete silence at the wrong moments. Divine order teaches discernment in expression. You learn when a word can heal and when silence can protect. This wisdom reduces misunderstandings and strengthens influence. Confusion feeds on fear of missing out and fear of making mistakes. Divine order replaces these fears with trust. You become confident that what is meant for you cannot pass you by, and what is not meant for you does not deserve your anxiety. This confidence allows you to move forward without constant second guessing. Order stabilizes direction. Even when circumstances shift, your inner compass remains steady because leadership has not changed. When God takes the lead, life becomes coherent. Pieces begin to fit. What once felt random starts to make sense. You may not understand everything immediately, but you understand enough to move forward with confidence. Confusion loses its grip because it thrives in uncertainty without guidance. Divine order introduces guidance, and with guidance comes clarity. The weak, the decisions, and the journey align under one authority, and peace becomes the natural result of proper leadership. Grace is released for speed, accuracy, and excellence when God is involved. Grace is not merely divine kindness, it is divine enablement. It is the unseen strength that empowers a person to do in moments what would normally take much longer, to decide correctly under pressure, and to produce results that surpass natural capacity. When a weak is committed to God, grace is activated as a governing force. Life stops being driven only by effort and starts being carried by empowerment. Speed without grace leads to mistakes, and accuracy without grace leads to exhaustion. But grace harmonizes both. It accelerates progress while preserving precision. Many people either rush and regret or move slowly and miss opportunities. Grace removes this tension. It allows you to move swiftly without panic and carefully without delay. This is why some people accomplish in 1 week what others struggle to achieve in months. It is not because they are more talented, but because grace has taken over what effort alone could not sustain. Grace also sharpens perception. Accuracy is not just about doing things right, it is about choosing the right things to do. In a world full of options, accuracy becomes a rare gift. Grace helps you discern what matters and what does not. You become sensitive to direction, able to recognize when an opportunity aligns with purpose and when it is merely a distraction. This discernment saves time, energy, and emotional investment. You stop scattering your strength and start focusing it where it will produce lasting fruit. Excellence is another product of grace. Excellence is not perfectionism. It is the consistent expression of quality. Without grace, excellence becomes stressful. People striving for excellence in their own strength often burn out, become critical, or lose joy. Grace restores joy to excellence. It makes diligence sustainable. When God supplies grace, your work carries a sense of ease, even when it requires discipline. You find satisfaction in doing things well, not because you are trying to prove something, but because excel. Length flows naturally from alignment. Grace also redeems time. One of the greatest frustrations in life is the feeling of being behind schedule, behind expectations, behind others. Grace introduces divine acceleration. It does not violate process, but it shortens unnecessary delays. It removes obstacles that have no permission to remain. This acceleration often looks subtle. A decision comes quickly, a door opens sooner than expected, help arrives at the right moment. Over time, you realize that the pace of your progress has changed. You are no longer struggling to catch up. You are moving in rhythm with purpose. Accuracy under grace protects from costly errors. Some mistakes carry long-term consequences. A wrong decision, a poorly timed response, or a misjudged partnership can affect years. Grace acts as a safeguard. It introduces restraint when emotions are high and clarity when pressure is intense. Sometimes grace speaks as a quiet warning, a pause, or an inner check that prevents you from acting prematurely. These moments of restraint are often more valuable than moments of action. They preserve destiny. Grace also improves learning. When grace is active, correction does not discourage you, it refines you. You learn faster because pride is reduced. You become teachable, open to adjustment without feeling threatened. This humility accelerates growth. Instead of repeating mistakes, you evolve. Grace turns feedback into fuel and challenges into training. This learning efficiency contributes to both speed and excellence. Another dimension of grace is endurance. Speed is not only about moving fast, it is about sustaining momentum. Many people start quickly, but added due to fatigue or frustration. Grace sustains energy. It renews strength. It allows you to remain consistent without becoming overwhelmed. This endurance ensures that excellence is not seasonal, but habitual. You do not just perform well occasionally, you build a pattern of quality over time. Grace shifts the source of success. You stop depending solely on willpower and start relying on divine supply. This reliance does not weaken effort, it purifies it. You work hard, but you are not driven by fear. You pursue excellence, but you are not enslaved by pressure. You move quickly, but you are not careless. This balance is the signature of grace at work. When grace is released, results carry a different weight. They are not only impressive, they are sustainable. They do not cost you your peace, health, or joy. Instead, they strengthen confidence in God's involvement. You realize that life does not have to be a constant struggle to be meaningful. With grace, speed, accuracy, and excellence coexist, and progress becomes a testimony of divine partnership rather than human strain. Every altar raised at the beginning of the week speaks all week. An altar is not merely a physical structure. It is a spiritual point of contact where authority is established and communication is initiated. In the spiritual realm, beginnings carry legal power. What is declared, dedicated, and established at the start gains influence over everything that follows. This is why the opening moments of a week are so critical. They set the tone, define the boundaries, and determine which voices are permitted to speak into the days ahead. An altar represents intentional focus. It is the act of stopping, to acknowledge God as the source and sustainer of life. When this acknowledgement happens at the beginning of the week, it becomes a continuous declaration. Even when you are not actively praying, later in the week, the altar you raise continues to speak on your behalf. It stands as a witness in the spiritual realm that this time has been dedicated, governed, and claimed. Time respects such declarations because they are rooted in authority. Altars speak because they establish covenants. When you dedicate the week to God, you are entering into a spiritual agreement. You are declaring that your days belong to Him and that His will takes precedence over all competing influences. This covenantal posture invites divine attention. God responds to altars because they signify surrender and trust. The response may not always be immediate or dramatic, but it is consistent. Protection, guidance, and provision are released because a relationship has been reaffirmed. The voice of an altar also silences other voices. In the absence of an altar, many altars compete for influence. Stress, fear, ambition, past failures, and external pressures all attempt to shape the week. These voices are loud and persistent. But when an altar to God is raised, it becomes the dominant voice. It establishes spiritual hierarchy. Lesser voices lose authority because a higher authority has been acknowledged. This is why weeks that begin with dedication often feel calmer and more focused, even when challenges arise. An altar raised early in the week also shapes decision making. Decisions are rarely neutral. They are influenced by underlying values and priorities. When the week begins with an altar, values are clarified. You become more conscious of why you do what you do. This awareness influences choices throughout the week. You are less likely to compromise, rush, or react emotionally because the altar has aligned your heart. The result is consistency between intention and action. Altars also preserve sensitivity. Life has a way of dulling spiritual awareness through busyness and noise. An altar at the beginning of the week sharpens perception. It tunes the spirit to recognize subtle guidance. You become more aware of promptings, warnings, and opportunities. This sensitivity is not mystical, it is practical. It helps you navigate complex situations with wisdom rather than impulse. The altar keeps the spiritual senses active. even when the week becomes demanding. Another function of the altar is remembrance. It reminds both the individual and the spiritual realm of ownership. When challenges arise midweek, the altar stands as evidence that this territory has already been claimed. This reminder strengthens faith. You face difficulties not with desperation but with confidence. Knowing that the week has been committed, the altar becomes a reference point, a moment you can return to in your heart when pressure increases. Altars also release continuity. Many people experience spiritual inconsistency, strong at the start, weak by the end. An altar helps maintain continuity by establishing a foundation. Even when emotions fluctuate, the foundation remains. The week does not depend on mood, it depends on dedication. This stability reduces burnout and emotional exhaustion. You are not trying to recreate alignment every day. You are building on what has already been established. Raising an altar at the beginning of the week is also an act of humility. It acknowledges that human strength is insufficient to manage time effectively. This humility attracts grace. God responds to those who recognize their dependence on Him. Grace then flows into the week, empowering actions, correcting mistakes, and sustaining energy. The altar becomes the gateway through which grace enters time. An altar at the beginning of the week is an investment. It may take only a few moments, but its influence lasts for days. It speaks when you are busy, when you are tired, and even when you are unaware. It shapes atmosphere, God's purpose, and amplifies alignment. A week that begins with an altar is not left to chance. It is supervised, directed, and preserved. The altar speaks and the week listens. Satanic interruptions are neutralized by intentional prayer. Interruptions rarely announce their origin. They often appear as sudden distractions, unexplained delays, emotional disruptions, or patterns that break momentum without obvious reason. Not every interruption is spiritual, but many are strategic. Their purpose is not always to stop progress outright, but to fragment focus, exhaust energy, and redirect attention away from purpose. Intentional prayer addresses this at the root by asserting spiritual authority over the flow of time and events. Intentional prayer is different from reactive prayer. Reactive prayer responds after damage has occurred. Intentional prayer governs before interference manifests. When prayer is intentional, it is specific, deliberate, and authoritative. It does not merely ask for help. It establishes boundaries. It declares what is permitted and what is forbidden. This posture changes the spiritual atmosphere of a week. Instead of responding to attacks, you preempt them. You do not wait for confusion to arise before seeking clarity. You establish clarity from the start. Interruptions thrive in unmanaged spaces. When time is not spiritually guarded, it becomes accessible to influence. Intentional prayer secures time. It dedicates moments, hours, and days to divine oversight. This dedication acts like a protective covering. It does not mean challenges disappear, but it ensures challenges cannot hijack direction. The difference is subtle but powerful. You still encounter resistance, but resistance no longer controls outcomes. Many interruptions operate through emotion. Sudden anger, discouragement, fear, or heaviness can disrupt productivity and decision making. These emotional shifts often feel personal, as though they originate from within, but intentional prayer stabilizes the inner world. By submitting emotions to God early, you reduce their vulnerability to manipulation. A settled spirit is difficult to derail. Prayer anchors emotions in truth rather than impulse. Another common form of interruption is distraction. Harmless activities suddenly consume excessive attention. Priorities blur, focus weakens. Intentional prayer sharpens discernment. It heightens awareness of what deserves attention and what is merely noise. This discernment saves time, You stop reacting to everything and start responding only to what aligns with purpose. Distraction loses power when purpose is clear. Delays are another tool of interruption. Not all delays are negative, but strategic delays aim to produce frustration and doubt. They tempt people to abandon alignment or compromise standards. Intentional prayer reframes delays. Instead of interpreting them as failure, you assess them through spiritual insight. Some delays protect you from premature exposure. Others signal the need for adjustment. Prayer provides the wisdom to tell the difference. This understanding preserves peace and prevents hasty decisions. Interruptions also target consistency. Many people start well, but struggle to sustain momentum. Midweek fatigue, unexpected demands, or relational tensions can disrupt rhythm. Intentional prayer establishes continuity. It creates a spiritual momentum that carries through fluctuations. Even when circumstances change, the underlying direction remains intact. You are not starting over each day. You are building on an established foundation. Prayer neutralizes interruptions by invoking higher authority. In the spiritual realm, authority determines outcome. When prayer acknowledges God's authority over a week, lesser influences lose jurisdiction. This is not about fear of opposition. It is about confidence in governance. You do not magnify the presence of interruption. You magnify the authority that overrides it. This shift in focus is crucial. Power flows where attention goes. Intentional prayer also brings accountability. When you commit your week to God, you become more conscious of your choices. You recognize when you are drifting and correct course quickly. This self-awareness reduces the impact of interruptions. They may still appear, but they are addressed early before they escalate. Correction becomes quicker and less costly. Another effect of intentional prayer is resilience. Interruption lose their emotional weight. Instead of feeling overwhelming, they become manageable. You respond with calm rather than panic. This resilience is evidence of spiritual strength. It allows you to adapt without losing direction. You bend without breaking. This adaptability frustrates the purpose of interruption, which relies on instability. Intentional prayer is not about fighting darkness obsessively. It is about establishing light consistently. Where light is established, darkness has limited options. By praying intentionally at the beginning of a week, you define the atmosphere. You declare that confusion has no permission, distraction has no authority, and delay has no control. The week unfolds under supervision rather than surprise. Neutralizing interruptions does not mean life becomes predictable. It means life becomes governed. You move with awareness rather than anxiety. You face challenges with confidence rather than fear. Intentional prayer transforms the week from a battleground into a pathway. Interruption loses its power because purpose has been established, authority has been declared, and time has been secured under divine leadership. God's presence in a week guarantees direction and favor. Presence is not a feeling, it is a governing reality. When God's presence is invited and acknowledged, it becomes an active influence that shapes decisions, encounters, and outcomes. Direction and favor are natural byproducts of presence because presence establishes relationship and relationship grants access. A week that carries God's presence is not left to guesswork. It is guided. It is not left to struggle alone. It is assisted. Direction begins with awareness. When God's presence is recognized, you become more attentive to inner promptings and external signs. Guidance often comes quietly through clarity of thought, peace about a decision, or restraint from a harmful choice. This subtle guidance prevents major errors. Many people seek dramatic signs while ignoring the gentle leading that presence provides daily. God's presence fine-tunes perception so that direction becomes continuous rather than occasional. Presence also simplifies choices. In a world filled with options, indecision becomes a burden. God's presence reduces complexity by aligning desires with purpose. You begin to want what is right rather than merely what is appealing. This alignment shortens decision-making time. You move forward with confidence because your choices are rooted in clarity, not pressure. Direction becomes less about analysis and more about alignment. Favor flows naturally from presence. Favor is not favoritism, it is divine advantage. It is the unseen assistance that causes doors to open, people to respond positively, and efforts to yield results. Favor does not always announce itself, but its effects are evident. Conversations go smoothly, opportunities arise unexpectedly, resistance weakens. These outcomes are not random, they are manifestations of presence influencing environments. God's presence also adjusts environments before you arrive. Favor often works ahead of time. Hearts are softened, circumstances are prepared. This is why some interactions feel easier than expected. You encounter cooperation where you anticipated conflict. Presence goes before you, arranging details in ways you may never fully see. This preemptive work reduces stress and builds confidence. Direction under God's presence also includes protection from wrong paths. Not every open door leads to progress. Some opportunities distract from purpose. God's presence provides discernment to recognize which doors to walk through and which to ignore. This discernment saves time and preserves focus. You are not driven by urgency or fear of missing out. You are guided by purpose. Favor under presence also affects timing. You are at the right place at the right time more often. Delays align to your benefit. Waiting becomes productive rather than frustrating. Timing is a critical element of success, and presence ensures that timing works in your favor. You learn patience without losing momentum. Another aspect of presence is confidence. When you are aware of God's presence, insecurity diminishes. You are less dependent on external validation. This confidence influences how others perceive you. People respond to assurance. Favor often flows through perception. When you carry presence, you carry authority, and authority attracts respect. This respect opens doors that skill alone cannot open. God's presence also brings consistency. Direction is not sporadic, it is sustained. Favor is not occasional, it is pattern. This consistency reduces anxiety because you are no longer relying on chance. You trust that guidance will be available when needed. This trust allows you to focus on execution rather than constant evaluation. Presence transforms ordinary moments into meaningful ones. Routine tasks become opportunities for impact. Small decisions carry weight. Favor often appears in these small moments, accumulating over time into significant progress. Direction keeps you from despising these moments. You recognize that purpose is often fulfilled through faithfulness in the ordinary. God's presence redefines success. Success is no longer measured solely by outcomes, but by alignment. You value being in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time. Favor becomes a tool, not a goal. Direction becomes a lifestyle, not an event. A week governed by God's presence unfolds with intention. You move with clarity. You encounter assistance. You end the week not exhausted by confusion, but strengthened by guidance. When God's presence fills a week, uncertainty loses dominance. You may not know everything, but you know enough. You are not rushed, yet you are not stagnant. Direction and favor work together, shaping a week that is purposeful, productive, and peaceful. Spoken declarations shape unseen outcomes. Words are not merely sounds, they are carriers of intent, authority, and direction. In the spiritual realm, speech is a form of action. Long before outcomes become visible, they are influenced by what has been spoken over time. This is why declarations matter. They do not create reality independently, but they align reality with authority. When words are spoken in faith and alignment, they give structure to the unseen realm, and that structure eventually manifests in visible results. Every environment responds to language. Homes, workplaces, relationships, and even time itself absorb the atmosphere created by consistent speech. When declarations are intentional, they establish expectations. These expectations guide perception and behavior. A person who speaks confusion prepares the ground for disorder. A person who speaks alignment prepares the ground for clarity. This is not positive thinking. It is spiritual governance. Words frame reality before actions confirm it. Unseen outcomes are shaped first in the inner world. Declarations influence thoughts, and thoughts influence decisions. When words align with truth, they correct internal narratives. Fear-based assumptions lose power. Confidence increases. This internal shift changes how you respond to situations. Opportunities are recognized instead of overlooked. Challenges are approached with strategy instead of panic. In this way, spoken declarations indirectly but powerfully shape external outcomes. Declarations also establish spiritual boundaries. When you speak intentionally, you are announcing what is permitted and what is not. This is especially important at the beginning of a week or season. Words spoken at the start carry momentum. They set the tone. They declare jurisdiction. Silence often leaves space for competing narratives to dominate. When you do not speak intentionally, circumstances speak for you. Declarations reclaim that authority. Consistency is crucial. One declaration spoken once carries limited influence. Declarations repeated with conviction create patterns. These patterns reinforce belief and expectation. Over time, they reshape behavior. You begin to act in alignment with what you consistently say. This alignment between speech and action accelerates manifestation. Words and actions reinforce each other, strengthening outcomes. Spoken declarations also influence emotional climate. Emotions often fluctuate in response to circumstances, but declarations stabilize emotions by anchoring them in truth. When fear rises, a declaration of trust restores balance. When uncertainty appears, a declaration of clarity redirects focus. This emotional regulation is vital because emotions heavily influence decisions. Stable emotions produce wiser choices, which in turn shape better outcomes. Declarations do not deny reality, they interpret it. There is a difference between ignoring challenges and declaring authority over them. Effective declarations acknowledge difficulty while affirming direction. They do not pretend problems do not exist. They declare that problems do not dominate. This posture maintains realism without surrendering control. It empowers action rather than escapism. Words also influence others. Declarations spoken in conversations shape expectations and responses. When you speak with confidence and clarity, people respond differently. Favor is often activated through communication. Clear, faith-filled speech builds trust. It signals leadership. This leadership opens doors and attracts cooperation. In this way, declarations shape relational outcomes as well. Another aspect of declarations is alignment with timing. Speaking prematurely or carelessly can produce resistance. Effective declarations are intentional and timely. They flow from discernment. When spoken at the right moment, they carry greater weight. Timing amplifies authority. This is why early declarations spoken before challenges arise are especially powerful. They prepare the ground. Silence can be strategic, but prolonged silence can also allow negative narratives to settle. Declarations interrupt these narratives. They reset atmosphere. They remind both the speaker and the environment of governing truths. This reminder prevents drift. Drift often occurs quietly without dramatic events. Declarations correct drift before it becomes deviation. Ultimately, spoken declarations shape unseen outcomes by aligning inner conviction, external behavior, and spiritual authority. They are not magic formulas, they are expressions of governance. When you speak with intention, you participate in shaping the future rather than reacting to it. Outcomes begin to shift because alignment has been established. A week filled with intentional declarations unfolds differently. Days respond to clarity. Challenges lose intimidation. Progress becomes measurable. You realize that words spoken in faith were not wasted. They were building something unseen. Over time, these unseen structures become visible results. Spoken declarations, when aligned and consistent, transform uncertainty into direction and potential into fulfillment. Spoken declarations shape unseen outcomes. Words are not empty expressions. They are carriers of authority, intention, and direction. In the realm beyond what the eyes can see, words function as permissions and boundaries. Long before outcomes appear in visible form, they are influenced by what has been consistently spoken. This is why silence can be dangerous and careless speech can be costly. When words are released with awareness and alignment, they begin to organize the unseen environment in favor of purpose. Every time a person speaks, they reinforce a narrative. That narrative either strengthens order or invites confusion. Many people unknowingly speak against their own progress by repeatedly verbalizing fear, doubt, or limitation. These words shape expectations, and expectations shape behavior. Over time, behavior produces outcomes that seem accidental, but are actually predictable. Spoken declarations interrupt this cycle by replacing destructive narratives with intentional ones. They do not deny challenges. They redefine authority over those challenges. The unseen realm responds to consistency more than intensity. One emotional declaration spoken once has little effect, but steady, aligned speech creates spiritual patterns. These patterns influence atmosphere. Just as a climate is shaped by repeated conditions, an atmosphere is shaped by repeated words. When declarations of clarity, favor, and alignment are spoken consistently, they become the dominant influence. Competing voices lose strength because they are outnumbered and overridden. Declarations first work inwardly. They train the mind to align with truth. The human mind naturally drifts toward fear and self-preservation, especially under pressure. Spoken declarations act as anchors. They remind the mind of governing principles when emotions attempt to take control. This internal stabilization is critical. A stable mind makes better decisions. Better decisions lead to better outcomes. In this way, unseen outcomes are shaped through internal alignment long before external manifestation. Words also carry spiritual direction. When you declare something, you are giving it orientation. You are saying, this is the direction this situation will move. Time, opportunities, and decisions respond to that orientation. Without declarations, situations default to the strongest external influence. With declarations, authority is established. This is why intentional speech at the beginning of a week is powerful. It sets direction before distractions arise. Declarations also influence perception. What you speak consistently becomes what you notice. When you declare progress, you begin to recognize opportunities. When you declare confusion, you magnify obstacles. This is not imagination, it is focus. Focus determines interpretation, and interpretation determines response. By shaping focus, declarations indirectly shape outcomes. You respond differently to the same circumstances because your interpretive lens has changed. Another critical aspect of declarations is alignment with responsibility. Effective declarations are not passive wishes, they are commitments. When you declare discipline, you become more conscious of your habits. When you declare excellence, you become less tolerant of mediocrity. Words create accountability. They remind you of what you have agreed with. This accountability strengthens consistency, and consistency accelerates results. Spoken declarations also influence timing. Words spoken early establish momentum. They prepare the unseen environment so that when opportunities appear, you are ready. This preparation reduces hesitation. You move with confidence because you have already declared direction. Many missed opportunities are not due to lack of ability, but lack of readiness. Declarations cultivate readiness. Silence, while sometimes wise, can also allow negative patterns to persist unchallenged. When fear, doubt, or confusion are left unaddressed, they quietly settle into routine. Declarations confront these patterns. They disrupt unhealthy cycles. Even when circumstances have not yet changed, declarations assert that change is permitted. This assertion weakens resistance. Declarations are also relational. Words spoken over others influence interactions. When you speak peace, clarity, and honor, environments respond. Favor often manifests through people. Conversations shift. Cooperation increases. Conflict reduces. These relational outcomes may seem natural, but they are often the result of consistent verbal atmosphere. Spoken declarations shape unseen outcomes by aligning belief, behavior, and authority. They create a framework within which events unfold. Without declarations, life feels reactive. With declarations, life becomes intentional. You stop waiting to see what will happen and start declaring what is permitted to happen. Over time, you notice a pattern. Weeks begin to reflect what was spoken at the start. Decisions align more easily. Challenges lose dominance. Progress becomes measurable. What once felt unpredictable begins to feel directed. The unseen has been shaped and the visible follows. Spoken declarations, when intentional and consistent, are not noise in the air. They are instruments of governance, shaping outcomes long before they appear. When God goes ahead, resistance bows and doors open. This is not simply a poetic idea. It is a governing spiritual principle. Every obstacle, every challenge, and every form of opposition has limitations. None can stand in the face of divine authority. Resistance in life is rarely random. It is a natural reaction to progress, purpose, and potential. Yet, when God leads the way, the force of resistance is neutralized. Opposition loses its power because the one who commands time, space, and circumstances is already moving. Before you step forward, resistance manifests in many forms. It can appear as external challenges, people who oppose your goals, circumstances that delay progress, or systems that seem designed to frustrate. It can also appear internally, fear, doubt, indecision, or procrastination that halts action before it even begins. In both cases, resistance aims to stop movement. Yet divine leadership changes the dynamic. When God goes ahead, resistance is confronted by authority beyond human limitation. What would have slowed or blocked progress is rendered ineffective because it cannot overpower the one orchestrating the path. Doors opening is a natural consequence of divine precedence. In life, doors represent opportunities, connections, and access. Many people wait for doors to open by chance, not realizing that divine timing, leadership, and favor determine their opening. When God goes ahead, the environment adjusts to accommodate his plans. People respond in ways that would seem unlikely. Resources appear just in time. Circumstances align so that steps forward are possible and productive. This is why some people experience sudden breakthroughs that appear miraculous, because God has already prepared the path and resistance cannot prevent it. The principle is also evident in relationships. When God goes ahead, influence shifts. Hearts that might have been hardened are softened. Alliances form unexpectedly. Favor is extended from places where resistance once seemed absolute. It is not manipulation, but divine orchestration. When God leads, interactions carry a different weight. People respond to authority and presence in ways that naturally align with purpose. Even difficult conversations yield results that would otherwise be impossible without his intervention. Spiritual warfare is another aspect of resistance. In the unseen realm, forces attempt to oppose destiny, delay progress, or cause derailment. When God precedes, these forces encounter a higher authority. Their strategies are exposed or neutralized. Their influence over events and circumstances diminishes. This does not always eliminate difficulty, but it ensures that challenges do not determine the outcome. Resistance may still appear, but it is no longer dominant. Its impact is mitigated by divine precedence. Faith interacts with divine leadership in a critical way. When you recognize that God goes ahead, you move with confidence rather than fear. Fear magnifies resistance and paralyzes action. Faith recognizes authority and steps forward in alignment. This alignment amplifies the effect of divine leadership. The combination of human obedience and God's precedence produces movement that is both effective and sustainable. You do not fight blindly. You move knowing that the path has already been prepared. Persistence is also empowered. Some doors appear slowly and resistance tests patience. When God leads, persistence is rewarded. Steps that may have seemed repetitive or frustrating eventually intersect with opportunity. Waiting becomes active engagement rather than stagnation. Each action aligns with divine orchestration, ensuring that effort is not wasted. This demonstrates the power of precedence. God does not rush you unnecessarily, but he guarantees timing that maximizes results. Resistance often manifests as confusion, delay, or unexpected setbacks. Divine precedence transforms these challenges into guidance. When God goes ahead, setbacks are reframed as correction, redirection, or preparation. What might have caused defeat is converted into instruction. Even when the natural senses perceive obstruction, the spiritual reality is that movement continues according to purpose. Resistance may appear formidable, but it is always secondary to divine authority. Doors opening is also about access. Opportunities, assignments, resources, and favor all represent doors that are not automatically available to human effort. Some doors require the intervention of authority beyond human capacity. When God precedes, access is granted in ways that human negotiation alone could not produce. Barriers dissolve, opportunities are highlighted, and timing aligns. The combination of divine movement and human obedience produces outcomes that seem extraordinary. When God goes ahead, life moves from struggle to supervision. Resistance loses dominance because it cannot supersede divine authority. Doors open because they have been prepared by a higher hand. Timing, favor, influence, and clarity converge to produce results that human effort alone could never secure. This principle applies to every season, every endeavor, and every step forward. When God leads, you are no longer fighting unseen battles blindly. You are walking a path that has already been authorized, defended, and equipped. The presence of God ahead transforms opposition into opportunity and uncertainty into clear direction. Resistance bows, doors open, and progress becomes inevitable. Committing your week into God's hands is not merely a ritual, it is a declaration of authority, alignment, and trust. When the days of your week are surrendered to Him, every moment becomes supervised, every decision guided, and every challenge met with divine strength. God's ownership of time ensures that nothing is wasted. His preservation safeguards your purpose, and His presence provides direction and favor. Spiritual alignment transforms ordinary days into opportunities for impact, while prayer and declarations neutralize interruptions and shape outcomes. As you dedicate your week, remember that resistance bows before divine precedence. Favor flows where alignment exists, and grace empowers speed, accuracy, and excellence. Each day responds to the authority established through intentional prayer, altar building, and declarations. Your actions, choices, and relationships are no longer left to chance. They are coordinated with divine purpose. What may appear uncertain or challenging in the natural realm becomes an arena of opportunity in the spiritual realm. A week committed to God is a week governed, protected, and blessed. It is a week where confusion gives way to order, delays yield to perfect timing, and obstacles transform into stepping stones. By beginning your week with intentional dedication, you set a foundation for clarity, peace, and unstoppable progress. Every step you take under His supervision carries direction, favor, and purpose. The act of committing your week is an act of faith that produces tangible results. It shifts the narrative from survival to stewardship, from struggle to alignment, and from randomness to divine orchestration. The days ahead are no longer uncertain. There are opportunities to experience God's guidance, presence, and favor in every area of your life. Step into this week with confidence, knowing that as you place your plans, decisions, and moments into His hands, you are walking under divine supervision, and the week will unfold according to His perfect will. The key is consistency. Continue to invite His presence daily, speak declarations of faith, maintain alignment, and walk in obedience. In doing so, each week will not just pass, it will fulfill its divine purpose, and you will experience the fullness of God's blessings in every area of your life.